Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to DevOps Vancouver, and my name is Andrzej Kamiński, and together with Alison Bennett, I'm co-organizer of this event. Since this is the first event of this year, so Happy New Year to all of you. We have exciting things coming this year. We, as always, will be inviting interesting guests, and today we'll be hosting Chef Team. And they are going to tell us about some interesting stuff that is happening there a little bit later. In the meantime, I'm going to hand over to Alison to provide some information about logistics.
Hey, thank you, Andre. And welcome everyone to a new year of great DevOps presentations. I hope you had a safe and happy holiday season. If you don't know me, my name is Alison Bennett and I'm the co-organizer, as Andre said, of the meetup. So tonight we have two presenters, including a demo. And it's an interactive evening, so there'll, as always, there'll be an opportunity for questions after each presentation. So throughout the presentation, each one, you can post your questions in the chat or wait until after each presentation finishes and ask your question to the speakers directly. There'll also be a quiz after the second presenter, and you'll have a chance to win some fantastic prize giveaways courtesy of Progress. We'll be recording tonight's meetup and we'll post it at a later stage, and we'll certainly let you know when it's available. So let's get started with our first presenter this evening. You know him, it's Andre Kamiński. Andre is a technology leader and an entrepreneur who's worked in engineering, product development, and agile project delivery. And he's held consulting roles across various industries over his 30-year career. He's currently a director at WorkSafeBC, and he's responsible for leading agile DevOps functional teams to deliver business value. Tonight, Andre is going to be providing us with an update on WorkSafeBC's DevOps journey. So over to you, Andre.
Great, thank you. So I will share my screen, and please let me know when you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So I have three things that I would like to talk about today. Before I move to the DevOps journey, and I'm giving this update every year since 2018. We started with DevOps at WorkSafeBC in 2017. But before I actually describe what we did so far, I'm going to talk a little bit about DevOps especially for those members of this meetup who are new to DevOps and would like to learn a little bit more. And I'm going to end up with the future, what we are thinking about where we want to go with DevOps in 2021. Okay, so why DevOps? So for most of organizations, there are two conflicting forces. On one side, we've got the developers. They are driven by change, right? If we are software developers, we are paid to write software, and we want to deploy it to production. On the other hand, we've got operations, and these guys are responsible to make sure that we've got the stable systems. Obviously, they don't like too frequent changes. And in between, we've got a business who wants both. So obviously, there is a potential conflict. Now, for organizations that do not implement Agile or do not implement DevOps, there is many challenges that they need to face. First of all, there is a long delivery cycles with our projects lasting 8, 12, sometimes 24 months. There is a problem with the mindset. People within the projects are waiting to be told what they need to do. This leads to low engagement, because if I'm not owning and I'm not really contributing to this project, but someone else tells me what I'm supposed to do, I am just coming here to work from 8 to 5. There is also lack of innovation thinking. There is a lot of managers are trying to optimize their resources fully, so to 100%. In other words, practically speaking, you must work on delivery of this particular project, but you never have time for innovation. So this also means that we have no time really for improvements and automation. There is limited engagement of the customers. In typical traditional projects, the customer is engaged at the very beginning and at the end of the project. So there is a gap about a couple, or let's say 10, 12 months. There is a focus on process. For those of you who are working with PMOs, that's what they are measured on, right? Are people adhering to those processes? There is a lot of manual and repetitive steps, and we don't really have time to improve. There is congestion in environments. For many organizations, we've got, let's say, integration environment, we've got a staging environment, and there is a lot of teams that are trying to work at the same time, which creates a conflict. Many applications are based on the outdated technologies, and we don't have time really to update them. There is a rigid financial funding, which leads to budget process that provides funding at the very beginning of the project. And then any time there's a change, we need to run with a change request that needs to be approved and new funding allocated, which obviously takes time. And we have a siloed departments with the handoffs to operations or the handoffs to sustainment teams. And I think what is really very important is the poor response to changing customer needs and market environment. And if you look, most probably you've seen this already on many occasions. This is the accelerating growth of technology diagram that shows how the technologies were adopted. And if you think about this, around 1400s, where the printing press was invented, the next significant invention was a telescope, which took about 200 years. And then the next 150 years later, we had a steam engine. Another 50 years later, telegraph. But if you look at what's happening today, these changes are just growing exponentially. And the organizations need to keep up with those changes to survive. So what's the answer? So here's the definition that we are using at WorkSafeBC. DevOps is a practice of development, operations, and security working together through entire life cycle of the project. When we started in 2017, this is the Puppet Lab report that we were actually using. This is the promise that DevOps should bring. So, for example, 200 times more frequent deployments, 24 times faster mean time to recover. It's a better place to work because people are engaged. There is more time to spend on development of the features and code. And at the same time, there is less problems with quality and less issues with security violations. And we have a lower change rate, failure rate, and there's a shorter lead times to deliver, and so on. So this is actually pretty interesting, and that's what was driving us when we were adopting. There are a couple of principles that DevOps is built around. The first one is a mindset. And mindset is really about how I approach the problem and who owns the problem. So when I face the problem, I'm trying to solve that problem. And if I cannot, I will try to find out the solution, and I reach out to other people, but providing them with already something that I thought about. The biggest thing, and that's what I'm trying to do actually at WorkSafeBC, we want to have people who actually own the problem. Right? If they face this problem, they try to find a solution, and they are empowered. There's nothing better to grow if we are facing a problem and you try to solve it, and you solve it successfully. And even if you don't, you still learned something on the way. The other element is automation. We obviously want to create enough space for innovation, for refactoring, for improvement. But if we don't have time, this will never happen. Automation is something that helps us to avoid repeating the same things over and over and over again. Agility, obviously, we need to collect feedback from our customers and from applications frequently, so we could actually adjust our software so it fits better in the customer needs. And the last one is safety. And there are two aspects to that: safety of the team to experiment, and safety of deploying applications to production. If something happens, we should be able to roll back relatively quickly. There are many tools and practices within DevOps, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because there is a lot of those items and it's quite busy slide, but there are 5 or 4 groups really of those practices. The first one is people. The people are really, really important, and everything starts with people, including the culture, right? Well, systems do not have a culture. It's really about people. The second one is information, collecting the information, and this information serves as a feedback for delivery. The next one is flow, is a process that is based on a relatively smooth flow and optimization of that flow. And the last one is technology. When I look at this slide, specifically at WorkSafeBC, we addressed actually, or at least we touched many of those items. There are some topics that are really for very advanced organizations, and we are definitely not there, like, for example, fix forward. Well, that so hopefully is going to come sometime in the future. So let me spend a couple of minutes on DevOps journey at WorkSafeBC. Before I do that, I would like to just introduce the organization. So WorkSafeBC is a statutory agency providing no-fault insurance to workers of British Columbia. The organization was started in 1917, and there are 3 major pillars. We've got the prevention, we've got the assessments, which is more insurance part of the business, and we've got the claims. We employ almost 3,000 people, and we serve 200,000 employers and 2.3 million workers in British Columbia. Now, this organization is 104 years, so you can imagine it has a very specific culture. Now, I was talking before about need for organizations to quickly adopt. If you remember that technology adoption curve. Well, we face also similar challenges. There are several forces, like, for example, changing global connectivity, automation. If you think about self-driving cars or self-driving machines that are going to come in the future. There is artificial intelligence being employed. There are more prevalent Internet of Things. There is a demographic shift, collaborative economy, urbanization, and environmental changes. All of these impacting our stakeholders, like employers, workers, and healthcare service providers. Now, the impacts that they and all of us really feel is new job types, some job phasing outs, increasing service expectations. There are new channels that will need to be used. There is more information available that could be used for improvement of our services, and there is more and more independent workers. Now, on top of that, there is obviously COVID, which we as an organization are helping to overcome. Okay, so our journey. Really the roots were started in 2016. At the time, there was an organizational commitment. As I said, the organization is really 104-year-old, but over last several decades, there were many IT systems and several applications developed, and those applications, some of those applications are over 20 years old. So there is a risk that they will, at a certain point, they will start falling apart. So at the time, the leadership of WorkSafeBC made a decision that we need to start reducing technology risks. So we need to review all the applications that we have, and we'll need to rewrite or port those applications to the cloud. So the future, all the applications at WorkSafeBC should be in the cloud. The way how we will be or would be delivering that, the decision was we are going to use DevOps or Agile and DevOps approach. And at the time, we had 10 people who started developing architectural and infrastructure backbone. We really started in May 2017. So that was the time when the first pod was created. And so we also created the time innovation pod. We set up foundation and Agile foundation and coaching, and we started with 40 people. A few months later, in November 2017, we had already 5 DevOps teams. And at the time, we already faced the potential challenge. Well, if you have 5 teams, Scrum of Scrum is not sufficient for collaboration. So we knew that we're going to grow and bring more teams. We decided to start adopting scaled agile. And in this way, it would allow us to collaborate better. So we adopted SAFe, and also initially informally. And we started with the first PI planning, which is program increment planning, where we get every single team together into one room and start planning so we could see who is doing what, and we could resolve all the dependencies and problems. And also what we implemented at the time, it was all team retros. Many of the problems that we are facing during the delivery are really the same for many teams. So we wanted to bring all the teams together so they could actually figure out what and how we could actually improve. And at the time, we had 70 people already. So in August 2018, we had 6 DevOps teams, plus we had 4 shared services teams. We established leadership team, which consists of the QA, release train engineers, like they are like program managers. We have a UX team, people development, and training. We brought our own Agile coach, and we developed a document that we call Agile Flavor. Every organization is different, and when people joining our organizations, they are coming from different background, and sometimes there is a different interpretation what means, for example, what is technical debt, right? So we want to make sure that there is no ambiguity, and everybody really understand what the technical debt is, how it's treated, is it any business value assigned to it, does it have a story points, and so on and so on. So this document grows over a period of time, and this is something that we always ask new starters to review before they actually start writing software. Also, what was really very important for us was to develop the DevOps strategy. The DevOps strategy really shows where we want to be in the future. And we look at the different dimensions. I'm going to talk about this in a moment a bit, but this is actually something that is really that put us actually on the right way. So this was really important. And at the time, we reached 100 people in the group. So then we continued. In December 2018, we established service reliability group pod that is helping our teams when they complete the projects. So when our DevOps teams are working on the developing of new software or project, they maintain this application in the production. And obviously, this is the best predictor of the quality of the software, because nobody wants to be woken up in the middle of the night. So at a certain point, when the particular application is complete, the team hands over this application to service reliability team. They've got a full checklist checking everything that how this application was behaving in the past, what are still open issues, and so on. So this is really working pretty well for us. We added additional 2 DevOps teams in December 2018, and also we had our first hackathon. We also had our first integrated demo where several teams were showing applications, the business applications, to senior leadership, how those applications integrate and work together. In 2019, we rolled out, this time officially, Scaled Agile Framework, and we trained 200 people and we certified them. We also hosted 2-day hackathon. We had 170 participants at the time. We established the portfolio implementation within DevOps that helps us with some predictability, what is really coming up, and understanding what resource allocations will be necessary. We also rolled out Microsoft Teams as a collaboration tool, although at the time we are still working on premises. We developed a set of analytical tools that provide us with information how well we are performing as DevOps group. We created Lords of Scrum's game. It was a type of gamifications of the agility. which worked pretty well. It was related to cultural change. We also introduced isolation of environments. I mentioned this at the beginning. There is limited number of environments, especially that because we are integrating with on-premise applications as well, which obviously causes a lot of tension and traffic on those environments. So what we did, we implemented service virtualization that allows our teams to potentially continue developing even if the particular environment is not available. We introduced test-driven development to the teams and we trained them. We also introduced micro-learning episodes that are published every week, and also introduced the product management. At the time, we only had product ownership. At this time, we also introduced the product managers. The relationship between product managers and product owners is that one product manager is working with several product owners. Product owners are more embedded with the teams. Product managers are more externally customer facing. And in 2020, we had 4 Agile release trains. So Agile release train is like a program, and they are focusing on a specific area. So we had 4 of them. In total, we had 16 teams. In the last program increment planning session, the big session where we get everybody into one room, in January last year, we had 200 people together, working together for entire day. And it really worked pretty well. Now, since then, because of COVID, we are working online, but we've got a similar number of people. We formalized the release train engineer function, which is like a program management leading each of those Agile release trains. We created immutable and still work actually on that immutable pipeline, and we implemented that. We established software engineering practices. We created dojos. We have 2 dojos for the teams to learn and grow and gain the abilities. And we have a dojo for test-driven development, and we've got one for vertical slicing. Now, these dojos are really pretty successful, and teams really like that. And we also work on the separating deployment from release. So as a DevOps, you want to deliver to production relatively quickly and frequently, because those small increments are reducing the risks. But it doesn't mean that if we deploy something to production, it has to go to the customers. So the business might decide to release this particular application to the customers when they want to do that and when they are ready, which means that we have to use things like feature flags. Now, this is a little bit challenging. There are few of our teams that are using this. Not every team is doing this at this point, but we are getting there. We also optimize the value stream release. So we identify where the bottlenecks in the entire process from the moment when the story is entering the backlog until when they are delivered to production. And we monitor this and improve. We had an InnoFest end of last year. And InnoFest is our new name of our hackathon. Now, this time we had 370 people working together with there were 107 ideas that were submitted, and it was really successful. We also created a Crank It Up board, and I'm going to show it in a moment. Crank It Up board is helping our teams to rise the bar and grow. We continue with portfolio management. We've got, at this point, about 10 communities of practice. We developed a culture deck that describes what we as a DevOps really what type of behaviors you want to see and what type of culture we want to see in the future. We automated a lot of reporting. We certified. We added additional people and trained them. So altogether, we got 350 people that were trained on SAFe in this moment. And since March of last year, we moved to work online. We're using a tool that is called IOBEA that helps us to plan together. So IOBEA has several rooms, and each of the rooms has like walls, and on those walls, we've got the boards, so teams could collaborate. So this is an example of Crank It Up board, for example. So on the left-hand side, the yellow stickers, these are the teams, and on the top, These are the items that we would like that the teams improve and certify. So for example, the first one is non-functional definition of non-functional requirements. The second one is vertical slicing. We had the one for test-driven development, automating building of the code, pull request, standardization, service virtualization, technical debt, and so on and so on. So each of those has its own definition. So every team knows what is really required to get certified and get the mark on completion of that. I mentioned the strategy before. So the strategy is really based on those 6 elements: culture, inception, development, deployment, release, and obviously operations. Culture is everything. Everything starts with culture and ends with culture. And obviously we've got the supporting practices. So practices and standards, we've got the technology, assets, analytics, people, and we are driven by continuous improvement. Within the strategy, every quarter we review the strategy and review how the teams are performing. So we classify different maturity levels, starting from crawl until fly. And obviously this is never ending, because every time or every year, every quarter, we want to raise the bar a little bit higher. This is how our teams looks like. As I mentioned already, we have 10 DevOps teams that are working on delivery of business value. Plus, we got additional 6 teams that are with the shared services. We have in this moment 4 arts, which is aligned with the business portfolios, which is assessments, claims, prevention, and you've got 1 for enterprise. Our teams mainly consist from product managers. So product manager is working with multiple teams. And then each team has product owner, business engineer, scrum master, up to 4 software developers, and QA engineer. The role of the QA engineer changes. The QA engineers are not testers. QA engineers are here to provide quality guidance to the teams. And the quality is responsibility of our entire team. And then we've got the teams, shared services teams like cloud engineering, security, database, integration. Also, we've got the service reliability engineering and UX teams. And that's how it looks like. This is one of the last on-premise PI planning sessions. And what's coming in 2021? So there is a lot of good stuff. At this point at WorkSafeBC, we are undergoing the digital transformation within IT department. And what we are adopting what DevOps has proven. But now it's not just DevOps, it's actually all the other delivery areas. So what we already did this year, we trained entire IT leadership team, all the directors, and we had a VP who were actually participating in 4-day SAFE training. And the reason why we wanted to do that, because we wanted everybody to really understand how they fit into this big picture and what is really the business agility and how this could be influenced and implemented. We had a product management training. So now the product managers really understand what is hypothesis testing and what is the customer centricity, how they can experiment rather than just purely trying to deliver a project. And we also moving from thinking about the projects that have very short life cycle or delivery life cycle to the product thinking that has a long-term impact. We also continue implementing behavior-driven development. So we started last year. Some teams are using Gherkin already to write their requirements. The reason why we want to implement behavior-driven development is because with the frequent deployments, we put a lot of stress on the business. The business responsibility is operations, obviously, and they don't have so much time. So we try to help them by automating user acceptance tests. My big dream is to have this year working code every day. I would like that the developers are able to check in the code before they go home, and there is automatic pipelines running with automatic tests, and the software, we know that the software is working, potentially could be deployed to production every single day. We continue with Crank It Up boards, so we are going to raise the bar on several of those items. We had earlier this morning actually some discussions what of those items going to be. We want to also introduce application resilience in self-recovery. Now, this is a stretch goal, but we would like that the application will become self-healing. We'll continue with safe training, obviously, and adoption of those skill sets. We are going to extend the portfolio from not only from to have it within DevOps, but also to have it across the business. So there is going to be one portfolio, and we'll be working together. It's going to help us to break silos. We are going to foster innovation. We are going to service reliability engineers. Hopefully this year we'll try to implement Chaos Monkey exercises. And what we did this year, WorkSafeBC technical blog on GitHub. It's published there. There's a link on this slide. So please feel free to see what our technology teams are doing. By the way, Microsoft is tracking this blog, so it's included in their communications as well. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Any questions?
Andre, there's a few questions from the chat. Maybe I'll start with one of those, but feel free, everyone, to call out if you've got any other questions. So here's an easy one to start, Andre. Will these slides be available somewhere?
Yes, we'll publish them.
Okay, great. And we'll let you know, Min, this is from Min, we'll let you know where they're available.
Okay.
Here's a question from Eric. Eric says, thank you for the great presentation. Just wondering what training and certifications you'd recommend for candidates trying to get into DevOps, such as SAFe, etc.
Right. So at this point, there is a lot of training that is available on the market. Honestly speaking, because we standardize on SAFe, within SAFe there is a training which is called SAFe for DevOps and DevOps engineers. So it provides some information about how DevOps really works. But honestly speaking, I would start with a technology or technical skill sets. So for example, we are hosting Chef today, right? Infrastructure as a code is definitely something that is very important in DevOps. So participation in meetups like this, building or trying to get into and understand how the tool sets are working. What is a CI/CD pipelines? There's a lot of training available, on the Plural side and lynda.com, or which is called LinkedIn today, right? So there is a lot of those spaces. I would start with that, and obviously then take, for example, training that SAFe offers.
Okay. And some more questions coming in, Andre. From Meninda, can you explain how or when was the security team and policies aligned in the journey? There's a notorious challenge of disconnect of security and development organizations in the field of DevOps. So I'm curious, what was the experience at WorkSafe and how was that gap filled?
Yes, so absolutely, this is correct. Every organization faces the same problem, and the major reason, or one of the reasons for this, is obviously security as well. As similarly to what is with operations, security also wants to make sure there is a relatively little change in production that potentially could implement some or introduce some problems. The additional problem as well is that there is only very few people with the security skill sets, right? So those teams are small. And in the moment when you try to, for example, deploy to production, they are always they're the gatekeepers, and there's not enough capacity for them to be able to review or the code, whatever is going to production. So there's a couple of things that we are doing in this moment. When we develop the pipelines, within the pipelines we add also some security testing, which helps the security teams as well at the end when the application goes to production. The other aspect as well is this shift left, right? This is one of the things which is really important, and that's one of the key success factors for organizations implementing DevOps. Shift left, that means that you start involving these people at the very beginning. So security can provide threat modeling, for example, or provide what they are going to look for at the very beginning of the project, or at the time where the team is actually working on that. Same thing, actually, we found out with service reliability engineers, right? Theoretically, they take over the application at the end, but it works really well for us when they are involved at the very beginning, providing those non-functional requirements. Similar with security. There is no magic solution, right? There is always this balance that needs to be found, and a lot of organizations call it DevSecOps at this moment. So definitely trying to involve and shift left is most probably one of the most important aspects.
A question here from Gaurav, Andre. He says, thank you for the wonderful details about WorkSafe. I'd like to know, with the continuous traction and toil going on in DevOps teams, how do you train DevOps managers to prioritize work?
Oh, that's a great question. So first of all, within DevOps, we have only 3 managers. I mean, this is a large group, but we have a very flat structure. What we do have is what we call leads. And leads are really about leadership. Within DevOps, everybody reports to me. So there is no, when it comes, from organizational chart, everybody reports to me. However, we've got the leads responsible for QA. We've got the leads responsible for example, for release management. We've got the leads responsible for business engineering, and so on and so on. So we've got several people like that. That's how we work. Now, the challenge, and we are going to face this right now with the transformation as well, is that the managers that used to work in the older environments need to really adopt different approach. In the past, and someone said that, we entered 21st century with 20th century management structure and approach. When you think about the managers, they used to watch how people are working, right? So for example, in 1940s, 1950s, in the factories, they could watch the workers working at conveyors belts. And you could see how they are performing. Then with the computers, it became a little bit more challenging because, you've got a lot of people sitting over there in front of their monitors, but you don't know really what they're doing. So it became a little bit challenging, but you still were able to walk around. You could look at the people, you could actually talk to them, and so on. Today, with the COVID, people working offline, this is a huge challenge for the managers. So what the management and how the management is going to look like in the future is a good question. My approach at this point is the management needs to move from a supervisory role or managing role more to the leadership role, right? Building the trust, empowering people. So empowering is, I was just talking about this earlier today in the office, but the thing is that the world is becoming so complex that managers or leaders or myself, we cannot be everywhere, and we cannot watch everything, and we cannot really understand everything. The people closest to the work are the best to solve the problems. We need to give them the opportunity to solve these problems by empowering them. And that's where management needs to move, which means it must probably, a lot of managers will need to relearn and give away this power, start trusting. Now it's easier easier said than done, but there is a lot of challenges. We are definitely going to face the same thing at WorkSafeBC in this moment. So we are actually looking at the best ways to train managers to adjust to the new world. By the way, all our managers were already trained on SAFe, leading SAFe. That's one of the training that helps them to understand how they fit in the big picture.
Okay. There's a couple of questions that are quite similar here, Andre. The first one's from Jason, and there's someone else as well. So can you talk about the primary tools used at WorkSafe, and perhaps also talk about the analytical tools?
Sure. So we are primarily Microsoft house at this point. So we're using Microsoft ASDO, so Azure, and Azure DevOps for collaboration. The same with the pipelines, continuous integration, continuous development, yeah, primary technology that we're using is the C# applications. What else? Yeah, and the second part of the question was, sorry, technologies and?
It was analytical tools as well.
Oh, analytical tools. We are using Power BI. So ASDO provides some basic reporting, but we are using Power BI for generation of a lot of reports within DevOps. And when it comes to applications, it's obviously on Azure, there is application insights that provides analytics.
Okay, and I might wrap up with one more question, and we can perhaps answer the other couple in the chat afterwards or later on. But this one's from Wayne, Andre. Do you hire DevOps SRE resources, or do you hire and train? So do you have a mini onboarding criteria, and how are you finding the right skill set?
Right. So we got a combination of both. So first of all, when we started, we actually used our own resources to get into site reliability or service reliability engineering. But over a period of time, we also started looking for skill sets outside of WorkSafeBC. So this is most probably, and I was saying this before, but honestly speaking, I'm 24 years old today, but if I would be starting my career from the beginning, I would want to become SRE. And the reason for this is that they're like, when they work, it is like drinking from the fire hose. They really need to understand everything. It's starting from understanding the business. They need to understand how applications are written. They need to be able to code. They need to be able to troubleshoot, and they need to understand and go into low level, like even looking at the packets flowing across the network to identify the problem. Plus, they are actually on call rotation. Right, so thank goodness we don't have a lot of problems, obviously issues. So that's not like a big thing. But honestly speaking, this is most probably one of the most challenging and rewarding work or jobs that we have. And yes, we are looking actually for SREs. We have some posting actually in this moment that is open. We want to bring one more SRE at this point. And actually, in the future, as I said, I mentioned about the digital transformation that we are doing in this moment. This SRE model was really very successful. So, and what we want to do right now, we want to have SREs actually across all delivery. That's how it's going to look like in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Andre. And thank you for a fantastic presentation. And Andre will obviously still be here for the rest of the evening, and we'll be sticking around. There's a couple of questions in the chat that we didn't get to, Andre, which you might be able to respond to either now or later on.
I can start responding. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So before I introduce our second presenter this evening, I'd like to welcome and introduce Rob Lauer. Rob is the Senior Manager Developer Relations at Progress. And Rob has also generously organized the prizes this evening for the quiz later on. So welcome, Rob. And are you available at the moment to say hi?
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen here really quickly, if I can find it here. I'm going to have you stare at the Chef website here for a moment. But yeah, oops, get my screens together here. Yeah, thanks, Allison, for having us here. So again, my name is Rob Lauer. I am leading developer relations at Progress for the Chef business unit. For those of you familiar with Chef, I did want to provide a little bit of background about what has gone on in the last few months since Chef was acquired by Progress. If you're not familiar with Chef, you should probably know that Chef has been around since I think about 2008, 2009. And Chef is at its core really an open source DevOps / DevSecOps company. And as Andre mentioned, is really laser focused on this idea, this concept of infrastructure as code. So all the products you see here on Chef.io, for instance, these are all open source. And the products run the gamut from Chef Infra, which is kind of the core, the oldest of the Chef products, provides infrastructure and configuration management, again, as code. You have like Chef App Delivery, which is actually Chef Habitat is the product behind there, and that's focused on speeding up and securing delivery of app and app updates in your CI/CD pipeline and such. There's also Chef Desktop that allows for desktop fleet management, and Chef Compliance is a big one for us now. That's kind of our security and compliance suite. That's what Jonathan's going to dive into here in a couple minutes. I will caution you that Jonathan and I are both relatively new to the Chef portfolio. We've only just started with it a couple months ago, so have a little patience with us. But anyway, back to those of you who already kind of knew all that. So Progress is the company I've worked for the past many years, I think going on 8 years now. We did acquire Chef back in October of 2020, of course. I think from my perspective, honestly, Progress is really lucky to have Chef. There is a fantastic team comprised of really passionate folks who, I've really enjoyed getting to know, but I've personally seen a lot of passion and appreciation for not only the products from them, but also really like proper DevOps practices. This is from everyone who's come over from Chef, which I've really just come to appreciate. But anyway, like my whole point here is that with big changes, come a lot of trepidation, concern from the community, which of course makes perfect sense, right? This is a big change for everybody. What I can say is that Progress is absolutely committed to making Chef successful here. Continue to grow, of course, paid users, but also the open source community. Progress does have a decent track record in open source. I should say more than decent. Decent sounds kind of negative, but it's a solid open source track record. So I think in the coming weeks and months, kind of as the acquisition dust starts to settle a bit, I think you'll see some of this kind of come out to play. And finally, before I forget, I did want to mention we are giving out some Chef swag after Jonathan's talk. We do have a sweet little online store you can use to order your own swag. And so I'll provide coupon codes that you just use and go to the store and it gets shipped to you for free and all that kind of good stuff. The only catch is you have to listen to Jonathan's talk and correctly answer a few short questions in the quiz. And actually, I will copy and paste the quiz in right now. If I can find the chat window, which apparently I can't without stopping sharing. So this is the Google form you'll use. So obviously you can fill it out as you're listening as well. And we'll accumulate all the responses and get in touch with everybody in the coming days when we get ourselves organized. But with that, I think I can turn it over to Jonathan for his presentation.
I'm going to do a quick intro of Jonathan, but thank you, Rob, for that, and we'll make sure everyone gets to see that that link to the quiz very, very shortly. So I just wanted to introduce Jonathan, a little bit about Jonathan. He's part, as Rob said, of the developer relations team, and he's an open source enthusiast, and he's passionate about developing technology in startup communities. And tonight he's going to talk about automating. As Rob said, please listen closely so you get an opportunity to get some of that Progress swag afterwards. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you, Allison. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. and we are going to be talking about automating compliance, and more importantly, how you can make sure that your organization, your enterprise, or your startup, wherever you're working at, has information security being provided continuously, not just during audits. So, right. I hope I'm loud and clear and my screen is visible.
Yep, it's great,
So,
Jonathan.
perfect. Hello there, I'm Jonathan and I'm part of the DevRel team at Chef, which is part of Progress now. And before this, I've worked at a lot of DevOps oriented companies like Postman. I have also been actively involved in helping companies understand and adopt the practices around DevOps. And like Alison mentioned, I'm a huge fan of the open source movement, which kind of makes me fit right in here. So, all right, what are we going to be discussing today? For starters, I'm going to be talking about making a case for compliance. And from some of the questions that have already come up after Andre's talk, I don't really think I need to do that, but I'm going to do it nevertheless. Then I'm going to be talking about how do you simplify this, because right now, everyone, the moment we talk about compliance or security for that matter, it seems to be an unnecessary headache. And I'm going to be talking about how we can simplify that. Now, most of my talk is very generic. And even though I work for Chef, and even though Chef has a direct product offering which can help you do this, you can use literally any tool, open source or otherwise, available in the market to achieve whatever I'm going to be talking about. But I'm going to be demoing Chef Compliance tool, which can help you do all of these things instantly. And I'm going to even be demoing the tool so that you get a proper knowledge on how you can use it. And we are going to close with a quick Q&A to address any issues or concerns that you may have. All right, so let's get started. So one of the things that I keep hearing, and in fact, I think there was a brief mention about this in Andre's talk as well, is when you're driving compliance or trying to maintain security or securing your systems, it sometimes feels like you're just plugging holes in a dam. Kind of like when you plug one hole and all of a sudden there's another one that pops up. And more often than not, the new hole is usually more dangerous and more damaging. So, which is why it's been a very tricky game for security, even though everyone theoretically understands the need for security. It's usually becoming an afterthought or something that people shy away, because everyone feels that it's kind of hampering the productivity or hampering the way businesses are coming out, or hampering the time to market. And with the modern DevOps practices and all of the new innovations that we have been moving, businesses are just after one thing: how fast they can get their application into the market. How fast can that business solution go to market? Everyone is in a hurry to reduce the time to value. But this speed, or rather this quest for the speed, comes at a cost to the organization. Sometimes a known factor is we tend to compromise on the quality of the application that we put out there. But sometimes it can be worse than that. We tend to ignore the security of our systems itself, and that can be a grave danger and a grave red flag, not just for the application, but also for the company as well as the customers that believe in your product. So there is a very delicate balance between the need for speed and the ability to do so, but in a secure and compliant way. So let's see what the challenge is with security and compliance. First of all, uh, based on some of the questions that have already been coming, do understand that people have started perceiving security and compliance as something that is important. But we really need to understand that security, and for that matter, even compliance, should in fact be non-negotiable. But as we know, the very fact that we need to maintain a security, we need to maintain the standards for those compliance, this sometimes causes impediments to the ability to deliver with speed that the business wants. And some of the reasons for this are security reviews are typically done at the end of the delivery process. And like Andre mentioned, getting security to shift left or moving that whole process with the shift left trend is something that can solve this. But keeping security review at the very end can usually hamper the whole production cycle. The second problem that we notice a lot is audits take away a lot of productive time from the staff, because most of the processes that are involved in audits are usually very cumbersome and require a lot of manual effort. But even when done properly, audits sometimes are not enough because they tend to limit the visibility and, more importantly, tend to hinder collaboration, which again can be a problem for your environments. Now, here is something that Gartner found. The prevailing perception is that InfoSec policies slow things down. And in fact, 81% of IT professionals completely agree that InfoSec policies inhibit agility and even speed. To make matters worse, 77% of security professionals themselves agree to this. So this is the situation where we are at. But let's look at it a little more in detail. Let's see why we have this so-called hindrance to the speed and agility that keeps coming up over and over again every time someone says, hey, you know what, security and compliance should be non-negotiable. So compliance and security reviews are usually the last step of development processes, which tend to be pretty long. Even though DevOps has drastically reduced the release cycles and the time taken to come out, it still can be a long time. And after dev and the ops teams are done with software or environments, they just pass them along to security people for the so-called review process. Now, since as it is already late in the process, the security teams have no idea what's in the environments, what's in the software itself, and they just treat it as a black box. And the easiest way to crack this would be to use tools such as scanners. Now, here's the problem with scanners. They can be useful, but at the same time, they generate a lot of data, which includes useless data. For example, false positives, uh, things like saying that providing responses for a Linux version where in fact the client is running a Windows version. So in the end, again, the security person now has to sit and sift through all of this data to find something meaningful, just like finding a needle in a haystack. The worst problem can be that sometimes people fail to define what correct is or what the standard is that the company adheres to, which means once the entire software is ready and it goes to the security team for the review, there's a lot of work and time and effort that has already gone into it. Having to redo any part of this is going to waste a lot of time and resources for the dev team, the ops team, the QA team, and the release engineering team. Obviously, people aren't going to be happy with the security team, isn't that? And finally, one of the things that most often we tend to forget is that customers often have environments that aren't perfectly compliant. When we develop software, we are usually developing for an ideal scenario, but customers usually have a way to find their way around and break things. So this is where things like exceptional conditions or the ability to manage exception comes in. And this again is going to cause more delay. So all in all, I'm saying is this happens to the best of us. Uh, During my time, I've come across plenty of examples, including a top financial services firm that had to literally bench their new application and security reviews for up to a year before they could be released. Similar story for a healthcare giant that we worked closely with, and they had to waste thousands of hours just on audits and just in the hope that they are compliant, because without that, they just cannot go to the market. So that was one part of the story. Let's look at the other side, wherein we have audits. And at the day the result comes and says, your company is compliant, is that the end of the story? No, it's not. Because the struggle to remain compliant throughout is real. And that is something I really want to spend some time over here. Generally, we assume that once you finish compliance or you finish an audit and you are found to be compliant, the level of compliance is assumed to be linear. And periodic checks are done through time to validate that constant level of compliance. So this is the assumption that we have. And if I had to draw it on a graph, it would be something that you can see to your left. But in reality, what really happens is the moment you finish your audit, it is visible that your compliance starts to deep if you do not keep checking it constantly. This is obvious because the moment you're going to make changes to your so already compliant system, there are going to be things that or changes that impact your compliance state as well. But until and unless you check for your compliance, you won't know. And you would have to wait until your next audit to suddenly realize that you have spent an entire quarter or the entire period between the two audits in a state of non-compliance. And that's not something I'm sure companies would be happy about. Again, going back to something that Andre was mentioning in the beginning of his presentation, DevOps was all centered around getting the development and the operations team together. And when the whole DevOps movement was successful, everyone thought, hey, this is it. We have pretty much nailed the entire software development paradigm. But a couple of years later, here we are, and now we are talking DevOps is not enough. We need security in the gamut too. So speed and risk are still in the balance when you want to move fast. But the faster you try to move when you're trying to release application, the higher is the risk associated when it comes to the security of both the applications as well as the state of the systems. Now, this problem gets even complicated when you have multiple teams involved in this. For starters, you're going to have one person from your compliance team or someone like your compliance officer, or maybe it is your CISO, who's going to have a binder full of regulations saying that this needs to be followed. And this is what the standard for our company or the standard for our systems is. This then go to the security team, and I'm sure they have their own scanning tools that they use to validate things and say, hey, this is achieved, this is critical, we might have a major risk over here. But the problem is it finally falls back on the dev and the ops team to actually fix the problems that might be uncovered, because neither are the compliance team nor are the security team really going to get into the details of let's fix this, because it's usually going to be something in the code or maybe something in the system which was set up by the ops team. So the problem here is that since all of these teams are using different tools to evaluate, there's a necessary translation problem. And the compliance regulation needs to be translated into security scans, and the output of those need to be translated into resolution. Something that can be probably not just being instead of having it all manually handed over and just wasting a lot of time in discovery, there should be something which can be automated. So for starters, we need everyone to be able to understand the position of security and compliance that the organization has adopted. And for that, you need a single source of truth so that not just the compliance and the security team are aware of what's the standard, but even the dev and the ops team need to know. And the beauty of this is once you have a single source of truth and a common set of tools being used by everyone, that's where things change. You can now codify your entire compliance and your entire security standards. And then you do not have the peaks and the drops that we noticed in the previous graph. All you can do is constantly keep evaluating your compliance and make sure that you are compliant. And one thing that we learned as an infrastructure as a code company is that if you keep check on your systems, and if you keep check on your systems all the time, you do not have to wait for a major tragedy to know that there was a problem. So let's see how we can use Chef to bridge this gap. So the old way that we had a lot of had the dev and the ops people working directly on mainframe or monolithic technology, where you really had true air-gapped systems. And the only way to gain access to them was to literally plug into the system and make the modification that you need. And that by far was the most secure thing that could ever be. But now we have things like Chef Infra, which is a tool that we provide, wherein you can make configuration automations in way that all of these processes are automated. And more importantly, with the same thing, you're getting better consistency across all the teams, as well as across all the infrastructure that you have. So we are going to use this exact same approach that we used with infrastructure as a code with compliance. We said, hey, if we can make infrastructure as code, why not compliance as code? And that is exactly what we are doing through our tool called Chef Inspect, which then goes into Chef Compliance to make sure your entire system is compliant. So how it works is you write inspect profiles, and which then translate the thing that can be easily remediated by your Chef Infra to make sure that your infrastructure is compliant at every point in time. So there is a good one-to-one relationship between what issues you're covering and the tools that you're using to fix them. Now let's see the benefits of using compliance as code. And this is something that we found to be very similar as using infrastructure as code. For starters, you have the ability to collaborate in a common language, in a human readable code. And I'm going to be showing this in the demo, wherein I'm sure many of you do not know Ruby or probably have your language of your own choice. But the beauty about this whole thing is the commands are in such a way, the entire code is in such a way that any person with a basic knowledge of English can read and understand it. The ability to scale beyond a single system is consistent, and not just for any reason, but in a very repeatable and reliant way. The ability to shift your security testing left, and this is something coming back to what Andre mentioned. And finally, you get continuous, you can monitor the status of your security and compliance continuously. So ultimately driving security and compliance through code into a very continuous compliance state where your security is no longer a barrier, but instead now it's an enabler of speed because you can keep doing the stuff that you really want to do. So let's see how it actually enables your speed. Now, with compliance as code, what really happens is you have multiple, you have chef compliance literally bridging that divide, and the gap between speed and the risk is now being managed by chef compliance. So you can manage compliance assurance using the same method that DevOps tools are already using it. This helps InfoSec teams adopt a velocity-oriented stance to keep up with the other teams within the organization. So this kind of helps you put you back on track and removes you from being that team that was blocking progress and blocking release cycles to the team which is now enabling them to go faster. The other part of compliance teams is with this whole compliance assurance that Chef Compliance provides you with, you are now moving from being just a manual process driven to more of being more of a automated and compliant version. So let's see how compliance looks like in production. So Chef has Chef Automate, which is a dashboard which provides you an insight into all the compliance of your nodes, of everything that you currently own. And I'm going to be demoing this in a couple of minutes from now. So I understand that compliance requirements keep changing from time to time. We have various type of platforms that we use or have to cater to. But here is where Chef really does the magic. And here's where we really, I think, shine. Chef pretty much does all of the heavy lifting for you. All you need to do is mention the type of platform that you want, mention the exact compliance standard or the compliance profile, as we call it, that you would like to be tested against. And Chef literally takes care of everything. In fact, it goes a step further, and at any point in time wherein your system is not compliant, it also provides you with remediation packages which can be used to remediate the state of your system and make sure it's compliant. And all of this is just through a few lines of codes, like just a few. Let's take, for example, the PCI DSS compliance audit. Now, this has 12 major controls, of which Chef covers 10 of them. And the other two just cannot be codified, or else we would take care of that as well. So from what I've seen, Chef has over 400 profiles, which cover most of the popularly used as well as the less popularly used compliance audits and profiles that are out there. So what is the differentiating thing that Chef has? For starters, with it provides you an unified auditing. So you have tools which are specific to cloud-based solutions or based on-prem. Chef pretty much can, Chef Compliance can pretty much manage all of them. including cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google. All of this can be taken care just using Chef Inspect and Chef Compliance. It also provides you a unified tool set. Instead of having multiple tools in the entire process and having to involve multiple teams, one team can take care of the entire process using just one set of tools, which are all interlinked. For example, Chef Compliance uses Inspect to create the security controls. It uses Chef Habitat to deploy them, and then it uses Automate to monitor the results of the audit. Last but not the least, it also provides you complete control. We understand that compliance is not something that is a one size fits all, but you need to make changes. You need to have exceptions here and there. And that's exactly what Chef Compliance does. It provides you control on what you want out of the compliance. So you can literally say, even though I'm using a particular profile, there are a couple of controls which just do not make sense for me, and I'm just going to do away with them. And Chef is going to behave accordingly. And I'm going to be demoing all of this right now. So let me quickly switch to my demos. Just give me a moment. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them up here so that we can answer them in the meanwhile, in the same time that I get oh yeah, can Chef Compliance be integrated with Azure-based infrastructure services? If yes, definitely yes. Not just Azure, we have support for Google Cloud, Azure, AWS, and literally all other majority of the cloud platforms out there. We have direct profiles, which I'm going to be demoing shortly. So let me pull up my terminal. Oh wait, hold on. Let me first share my terminal. All right. Okay, I hope you can see my dashboard. Can anyone confirm if I'm sharing the right screen?
Yes, we can see event feed at the top.
Perfect. All right, so then we are at the right place. All right, so this is the Chef Automate dashboard, which is a one-stop solution for all your Chef tools within. Right at the top, you have a dashboard which talks about all the events, all the creations, the deletions that were done. Now I'm running a demo version of this, and it's a trial license for 60 days, which everyone gets. So it's pretty generous that way. Now, if you were to use Chef Habitat, all your applications that are built and are being monitored would come here with any kind of warnings or any kind of issues flagged over here. If you use Chef Infra to manage your nodes, then all of your nodes would be displayed here, and you could manage them from here, right from setting them up to managing them. And finally, coming to what we are here for today, Chef Compliance. So here it is. Right now, what I have is one node which I've created, and it's, as it says, your system is not compliant, and that's what we are going to be doing in the demo. So right at the top, you can see a dashboard which quickly tells you about the status of the node, the number of nodes there are, how many of them have passed, how many you have skipped, waived. It also talks about the critical failures in terms of the nodes. It shows the status of the nodes over time. Now this node, I just whipped it up a couple of hours back, so it doesn't have history, but you could see the history for the last 10 days, the last month, or over the last year as well. And finally, it also shows you a quick glimpse into the top platform failures as well as top environment failures, if any. So all of this is a quick visualization of what's happening across all your nodes. Now, when I go into nodes, it shows me the type of nodes that I have. Right now, I have just a CentOS node, which I've created on using CentOS 7. And it shows when the last scan was done. It shows the control failures. So I have 6 failed controls right now. And in fact, if I do click on this, it's going to show me all the controls that have passed and failed. So right now in my current profile, I have 10 controls, 6 of which have failed, 4 have passed, none have been skipped or waived. And if I quickly click on the drop down, it's going to show me the result as well as the source. So first, let's look at the source, and let me talk about the human readable programming language that I was talking about. So right here, it just says control 1.1.1, which is the ID of this particular control, and says ensure mounting of CREMAP file system is disabled. Do title, which is going to be the title of this particular control. And it gives, and by the way, the title itself is pretty sufficient for you to know that what you want to make sure is that the mounting of this file system is disabled. So yet there is a full-blown description here, including a rationale for why we are doing it. Impact going from 0 to 1, wherein 1 is critical. And then finally, a describe kernel module, wherein there is a do action where it says it should not be loaded and it should be disabled and end. So this right now is one particular control for making sure that this particular file system is disabled. The result of this is the kernel module is expected not to be loaded, and that's done. But it's also expected to be disabled, and it's not so. So which is why to return true but got false. So you can see all of the other controls that are here. We are also going to look at how we fix that. But before that, I'd also like to walk through the other things that Chef Compliance provides you with. So you can have scan jobs wherein you create repetitive scanning schedules for either the nodes. You can also add nodes by directly importing them, or you could directly provide an IP or a host name. Just provide the credentials and you're good to scan it. Coming to the most important thing and the beauty of Chef Compliance, as I like to call it, it's the profiles. So right now we have 0 profiles that I have, but if you see, there are 408 available profiles, and this includes all the security benchmarks that are out there, which I was talking about earlier. And all of this is available to you to be used. So for example, the CIS AIX 5.3 benchmark is available here. It has 77 controls. If I want to use this as a benchmark for my company, all I need to do is click on the get button. And it's as simple as that. And all of this is maintained by Chef. Obviously, you can write this and do this on your own, but hey, it's available freely right here. I remember, so to answer the question on how to do this using Azure, all you need to do is type Azure, and you have profiles for Azure. You have your Azure Foundations benchmark, you have benchmark level 1, level 2. Again, it has all the controls that are required. And there you go. So all of these controls and all the available controls are also available for you to, you could just visit the chef.io website and you would get to see all the available controls. So coming back now, since I'm using CentOS, let's see if we have any profiles for CentOS available. And oops, CentOS, there you have them. So many of them. The industry standard for DevOps, everyone knows, is the DevSec hardening framework, and we have those as well. And all you need to do is just hit that download button or the get button and import them into your application. And Chef is pretty much going to take care of everything. Now, again, to reiterate, you could have written all of this, but we have done all the heavy lifting for you. And all you need to do is tell Chef compliance which profile you intend to use or scan against, and Chef is going to do everything for you. So coming back to my non-compliant node, let's again quickly view what it has and let's see the problem. So right now, let's look at the fail controls. We have 6 fail controls, and I'm going to fix, let's start with ensuring SSH protocol is set to 2. So right now, the source says the control wants to make sure that the SSH protocol is set to 2. There is an entire description, there is a rationale behind it, and the impact is 1.0, which means it is critical and really needs to be so. And in the do block, we have its protocol should be equal to 2. The current result is expected 2, but got nothing, which means it's still not satisfied. So I'm going to be opening my terminal. I hope my terminal is visible, and I'm going to SSH into the CentOS node, CentOS, and oops, sorry. And all right, so now I am into my CentOS environment, and the first thing I'm going to do is go into the DevOps.van. All right, so now first thing I'm going to walk through is the plan file that I've created on telling Chef what I expect it to do and how I want to achieve compliance for my systems.
Your terminal is not visible.
Oh, it's not? Oh, hold on. How about now?
Yes.
Yep.
That's good.
Perfect. All right. So what I just did was I have SSH'd into my CentOS node, and I was going to quickly show what is in my plan file. So right now here I have 2 folders, one of which is the habitat, which is going to be used to deploy the entire compliance state using Chef compliance, and the other is the result folders, which has all the results and the logs of all the scans that have been run. So let me first open up the habitat plan.sh file that will show what we have planned or what we are asking habitat and compliance to run for us. So if you notice here, I have a package name, which is a profile called Linux CI sample, wherein I have put in those 10 controls, which it just scanned over here. The package origin is the name that I have given, which is going to find, which is where the package is going to reside. Package maintainer, the license, and now here is where things get interesting. We have the scaffolding, which tells Chef compliance that, hey, the scan package and the remediation package are going to reside at this particular location. Now for the scan package, I have provided the Linux inspect sample, which I've created. And this has all the the controls that I want Chef to scan it against. The remediate package similarly has the remediation solutions to this controls. If any of them fail, it's going to remediate based on this. Now, just a mention, the remediate packages are usually a premium content offering that Chef provides and is usually paid, but there are a lot of open source alternatives available as well on Chef Supermarket, so feel free to search for that as well. Another point to note, when we do run the scan, by default, even though the scan package and the remediate package are both listed here, by default, Chef compliance is always going to run only the scan package and will always ignore the remediate package until and unless explicitly asked to do so. And that gives you complete control on when you just want to scan versus when you want to scan and remediate the issues that you have. So to fix the problem that we noticed here, which is to make sure that the SSH protocol is set to 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my config file and vi habitat. All right, and I am going to insert a code which is part of which will tell Chef compliance to start using the remediation package and start fixing the problems there are. So let me, to save time, let me quickly just copy paste this here. And I'm going to insert it here. All right, so briefly to walk through what I'm saying is, hey Chef compliance, for the control ID 5.2.4, run a scan, and when it comes to remediation, also run it for me, because the boss wants strict compliance standards for SSH. That's a justification. Sorry for a slightly lame one. I would hope that everyone gives a more appropriate one. And I'm going to save this. All right. So the next thing that I need to do is make sure that Chef starts sourcing this particular file. And to do that, I'm going to source the environment which was built. So this would tell Chef where exactly this file, the config file that I have just created now, resides at. Now that is done, the next thing that I'm going to do is install this file using Habitat. And I'm going to install this package. And the next thing, oh wait, sorry. I first need to build this package, my bad. Let me, all right. And I'm going to give the command build. Right now we are in the Habitat Studio and it's building it for us. It's done. I'm going to exit. And now I'm going to mention getting it into getting the last. And now it can install one new package installed. And now I am going to have Habitat run a supervisor for us to make sure that this package is running. It's initializing, starting the service. Yes, there you go. Now I know it's slightly difficult to view this result here, so let me just go back to the dashboard. Remember, this was not compliant, and now I'm just going to refresh this. And there you have 5 failed controls. And if you look under past controls, you'll have SSH is now set to 2. So we could have done this in a manual way. And I know this is just one node, so it would rather not be that difficult to do it manually, but imagine doing this for 1,000 or 10,000 nodes. Imagine how much time Chef compliance has just saved us with just a couple of lines of code, I got this to remediate this issue so easily. All right. Now, the other thing that I quickly want to show, I know we are running out of time, but let me show you one other thing to make sure that this is fully compliant, is exceptions and creating waivers. So there are times and situations wherein you might not want all of this controls to be enabled for your scan. Probably because you either do not have the solution right away, or probably sometimes it just doesn't make sense to have that control for your scan. And Chef Compliance provides you the option of waiving that control either permanently or for a certain time limit. And I'm going to do both of those in the next run. So let me, again, just to save time, I'm going to just copy paste this code directly. All right, so let's all right, so here what I'm doing is we have already set to 2 the SSH protocol that's sorted. I'm going to do the same thing, remediate for another error that was already there. But at the same time, I'm also going to make some of the scan stop running. And to do that, all I have to do is change the scan run value from true to false. Also, I don't want it to remediate. So again, the run value is changed to false. I'm just providing a justification. Similarly, I'm doing the same here as well. Now here, I'm going to set a waiver, but for an expiration date from today till this date, I do not want this scan to run. Post that, it can do whatever it wants. And the same for this. So let's run this again. First, let me save this. I am going to do Hab Studio, enter. And I'm going to tell Habitat Studio to build this package for me. Let's exit from the studio. We have the package ready. I'm going to push this into the build environment. I'm going to have it install the package, and let's run the supervisor. And it seems to have worked. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to refresh this, and there, as you see, it now says that this node has no fail controls. It has 6 pass controls, and we have waived 4 controls. It will also provide the details here. Right now, this is a waived control with the expiration date. So if I go back to reports, and here is CentOS, and it says it has passed. Now, it also shows that your system is compliant, and if there was any problem, I would see it right here. So right now, I know that my system is compliant, but I need to share this with maybe my manager or my manager's manager or the CISO. And it helps, this can be done very simply. You can either download this as a JSON or a CSV and share this entire report, or even better, you can just copy this URL. And if you open this up, again, now this is a demo version, so it won't really open on yours. But if I had to just share this URL within my organization, anyone could access this and know which nodes are passing, which nodes have failed, and what are the problems exactly. So there you go. This is how Chef Compliance makes your life simpler. I hope this was this makes sense and this was useful. Let's get back to my presentation. All right. So now that you have seen this, if you need to know more about Chef and Chef Compliance or the other product offering that Chef has, you can head over to the Chef website, chef.io. We have a detailed documentation on each and everything that I just mentioned at docs.chef.io. If you want to learn about DevOps, DevOps offerings from Chef particularly, and how to use them in the grand scheme of things, you can use our Learn Chef platform. And might I remind you, we have a very active and bubbling community, which is available at community.chef.io. And we also have a community Slack channel wherein there are constant discussion, not just about using Chef, but also about DevOps and DevSecOps in particular. And again, a reminder to head over to the quiz to win some cool swag. This is the URL. I think it's already posted in the chat, and that's it. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful. If there are any questions, feel free to ask, and you can always reach us at any time. Happy to help.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That was fantastic. Great presentation and demo. And we appreciate you got up early to join us. We could hear the rooster in the background at one point who was telling us how early it was. Does anyone have any questions for Jonathan this evening? There were a few in the chat, but we'll see if anyone's got any live questions for you.
I have a question. Hello, Jonathan. Can you hear me?
Hey, yes. Please.
Yeah, I just want to find out if the security scan can be integrated into Jenkins as a post build to run the scan before, like after you finish merging a code in Jenkins.
I am not quite convinced that would be possible, because Habitat would run on its own. So I'm sure there might be a way to work around this, but as far as I know, there is no direct way to directly integrate it into your Jenkins environment.
Oh, okay. I mean, I just feel like, when you have like container deploy as a plugin that would just, take whatever the already built code that you have and ship it into a server. Yeah, I just wanted to know if there's something like that for this to run the security check.
Yeah, so you can run it simultaneously. Yeah, definitely. You can run that.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, any other questions for Jonathan? Okay. You've baffled everyone, Jonathan, or you've answered all their questions already, I think. But certainly, please reach out to Jonathan, or we can pass some questions on as well, or you can keep adding a few in the chat if you like. So thanks again, Jonathan. Are there any other questions for Andre or for Rob? Please feel free to ask them now before we wrap up for the evening. No? Okay. So that brings us to the end of the evening. I'll put my video back on. That brings us to the end of the evening. I'd like to thank Andre, Rob, and Jonathan again for some fantastic presentations and also for the demo. Jonathan, really appreciate it. And thanks, Rob, for helping to organize tonight and organizing the great quiz and the swag as well. I really appreciate it. So please stay tuned. Next month, we've got another meetup and we'll have another great lineup of presenters. If you or anyone you know is interested in presenting, please reach out to Andre and myself at any time for any future meetup where we're most happy to hear from you. Anything else from you, Andre, before we close?
No, I think that's all. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.